Mr. Clint Emerson. Thanks for being here on the Wolf and Iron podcast, man. It's great to connect with you.
Hey, back at you. I'm glad it's finally linked up and good to go now.
I kind of wondered if the airlines are going to get a little more crazy now that they've lifted the mask mandates. Who knows? If people are like, finally, I'll fly. But I can't imagine that there's that many Americans that just held off this long. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so. I've been flying through all of it. I mean, there were moments when the planes were empty, but those were far and few between,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think people are going to go full bore again. But interestingly enough, as soon as the masks come off, the gas prices go up. So I'm wondering, with the fuel prices increasing, how that's going to affect these airline tickets these days.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, man. Well, look, I want to talk to you about your new book, The Rugged Life, and we'll get into some of that stuff. I'm pretty sure that most of my listeners here are familiar with you from the 100 Deadly Skills series and things like that, and the podcast that you do. By the way, I've got a Can You Survive This scenario for you.
All right.
That I want to throw out at you. Okay. Here's the scenario. You're in North Carolina in April, and the weather is perfect and everything is beautiful, but you feel like you're going to die because it's allergy season. Because that's what's happening. That's what's happening right now. It's like allergy season right now, and it's killing everybody. It's could you make it? Could you do it? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. So you just shove, me and I like condoms and tampons and all those improvised survival tools. So maybe, you shove some tampons up your nose and, breathe through a condom and you'll be good to go.
And probably wouldn't look too weird. It wouldn't look too weird.
Hey, no different than anything else.
That's right. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and then we'll kind of get into the book a little bit.
I'm a Texas kid, grew up in Texas up till I was about 8 years old, went to Saudi Arabia from second grade to high school, came back to the States. The whole time I wanted to be a SEAL. I went to college and about a semester shy of graduating from college, I went ahead and signed the dotted line and enlisted in the Navy because I just couldn't wait any longer. And I went to boot camp. And then at that time, you had to go to an A school. So I went the corpsman route, which is a medic in the Navy. And then went to BUDS. I was in BUDS class 203, did the SEAL thing for 20 years and some change. And then, I got out and have a company called Escape the Wolf that does crisis management for Fortune 500 nonprofits, private schools, places of worship. And then I put out the 100 Deadly Skill book series, as you mentioned. That was a way of giving the average person the same kind of safety and survival and security skills that I was giving corporate America. And now I've just been putting out, it's kind of averaged out of basically a book per year since I've been retired from the Navy.
Yeah. And I love the way the books are laid out, the illustrations and that kind of stuff. And even with the Rugged Life, I had a chance to kind of go through that, preview that before it hit the shelves. And one of the things that it reminded me of was these books that used to come out and really be popular right after like World War II, like in the 1950s, because there was such a drive for independence and like American resilience. I mean, we had like, the Great Depression, and then we had World War II, and everybody's saving and thinking about it from a community, like how can we take care of each other and how can we, save and not use more than we have and repair our own homes, our own cars and all that kind of stuff. And so there were a lot of books that kind of came out that really supported the average guy to do these things. And then a lot of those things just fell by the wayside as we got more, modernized. And what this kind of reminded me of, the Rugged Life book kind of reminds me of that, like a modern day version of that, because there are a lot of elements that you bring into sort of, modern day, like solar power and stuff like that. And so I just I wanted to know what was your inspiration for writing this particular book, as it's kind of a bit of a departure from, 100 Deadly Skills, but it's also kind of in that same vein of taking care of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good question. 100 Deadly Skills is really about surviving seconds, minutes, and a couple of days, right? And and each one of those books tackles specific kinds of threats that are out there. And so when I got done with Combat Edition, which is really, person versus person type stuff, I started thinking about how can we put something together that supports people recovering from a pandemic. And like you said, it's the things that are really important besides safety, security, and survival is being self-reliant and not so, digital. It's the best way I can put it. I knew that, I want to stay in my lane of what I just call the big umbrella of crisis management. But the best way to really avoid most crises is through preparedness, right?
Yeah.
And if you're thinking about it and you're preparing for it, because you're taking all those steps and measures, usually you never have to worry about it. It never touches you. And so the rugged life is on the left and the right flanks of crisis, because what it's pushing is the more self-reliant you become, the less global crises and major events will affect you, right?
Great.
So the more you start doing for yourself and not relying on the outside world, well, then the outside world can't touch you. It's like creating an air gap between you and everything else out there. And I think it was missing, right? We have everyone relying on their smartphones to get through the day, to have food delivered to their door, to make sure the coffee is ready. As soon as they go through the drive-through, it just gets handed to them. All of that convenience has driven complacency and laziness, basically probably beyond what it's ever been in history. And like you mentioned, on the back end of depression, the back end of world wars, people knew how to conserve and how to do things for themselves. Hell, if you go all the way back even further, every American male, woman, and child knew everything and then some that's in the rugged life.
Yeah.
Right. Because that was the way of life, right? The rugged life was the way of life. If you go back to, if anybody's watching Yellowstone and then looking at the precursor of 1883, immigrants, basically consolidating and right here, Fort Worth, Texas, and then going, all right, now we're going to go up to free land and stick stakes in the ground in Montana and Oregon and Wyoming, and then say, this is my home, and then build it from the trees that surround them. I mean, but it's important to note, I'm not saying, hey, you got to go that far back and get a chuck wagon and go out in the middle of nowhere and start, cutting trees down and figuring out how to turn it into lumber. I'm just saying it's time to start being more self-reliant so that you don't have to worry about where you're getting your toilet paper or hand sanitizer next time. You should be capable enough to not, that should be last on the list anyway. Like that just didn't make sense, right? But it also showed a certain level of ignorance and lack of skill, just in the decision making alone. That hey, I need more toilet paper than my neighbors because it's amazing because rice and beans were still full on the shelves. You know,
right? Yeah, like
which is just nuts. Yeah. So that's a really long answer, but the takeaway is just be more self-reliant, so that, you can limit how much the outside world affects your lifestyle.
I remember I was in a Trader Joe's parking lot, probably, I don't know when the toilet paper crisis, if you want to call it that, when that big scare happened, but I was in a Trader Joe's parking lot. I just walked out and a box truck pulls up somewhere else in the parking lot and it just lifts its door open. I'd never seen anything like this before in my life, except for like in movies. And they got just toilet paper in there. And people are lining up, like handing out cash as if it's like freaking gold, or it's like cigarettes have just come back to life, or whiskey finally became legal again or something.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it. And I said, God, I never want to be like that person. It just blew my mind how many people really kind of bought into that kind of stuff. Some friends of mine, we have conversations sometimes about what would it have taken, like what would your position in life have had to have been to not even have noticed all the stuff that was happening with the COVID lockdowns and things. Mm-hmm. Would it have been, you just simply don't have a social media account? or you turn off the news, would you have to have moved, out of the city? Would you have to have moved like, really off the grid? But there is a point at which, as we're thinking through those scenarios, it becomes a kind of relief to think like there are people in the United States that haven't had to deal with this junk in the same way that a lot of people have had to deal with it, because they are
Hmm.
more self-reliant, they are more, self-sufficient, and they just don't, those types of things don't really impact them. And so I absolutely see the book as being, critical, in that area. Um, one of the series of books that I like, I don't know if you've ever read these, but it's from my part of my neck of the woods. It's called the Foxfire series. And
Hmm.
back in the 60s and 70s, these college kids from Appalachia, I don't know if it was Appalachia State or whatever, but they basically went out and started interviewing people that were old, like old people in their 90s and plus, that had been around since before, like, electricity was available. And many of them still lived that way.
Yeah.
And it first went out with like a school project, and then eventually that became like a school newspaper, which became a book, which became, a series of books. And it's just amazing to read because these kids are reporting this stuff in the 60s and 70s, but the people that they're interviewing are still living as if they were in the 20s and, prior, with many of them without electricity.
Hmm.
And it's just an awesome thing to just see how they lived, and that kind of resilience and that self-reliance that could still exist even, as times sort of advanced. So, um,
Yeah. I think, well, self-reliance, um, there is a direct correlation between how much money you make and self-reliance, right?
yeah.
Most people that make a lot of money are not very self-reliant. And
Good
those
point.
that don't have a lot and live in the backwoods and have, maybe have had like a very, very blue collar job, they know that, hey, I need to know how to get things done because they can't afford to have someone come do it for them, you know. But there is a balance, right? Regardless of, your financial status. The rugged life, the key word in the subtitle is it's a modern guide to self-reliance. So point being is you don't have to get rid of modern technology. You embrace it in order to support being more self-sufficient.
And I think one of the things that I'm learning as I get a little bit older, because I grew up in the country, but I've raised my kids in the suburbs and been in the city, or just
Mm-hmm.
outside the city for most of my adult life. And one of the things that I'm realizing that they've missed out on that I got just by way of where I was raised is that when we remove ourselves from this kind of rugged life, is we don't feel as grounded in the other areas of life. If I don't know how to hunt, if I don't know how to provide for my family, if I don't know how to, grow things, if I don't know how to create a shelter, if I don't know how to, do some of these basic things or things that we used to consider basic, I feel very much out of place. And I see them and I see other men who are, adults even older than I am. They just
Mm-hmm.
don't feel they don't feel grounded in the world because they haven't really had those basic skills solidified. And so when they start doing things like hunting and they, studying these types of things and, learning how to build traps and whatnot, they actually feel a lot more like just secure as a man. I kind of wanted to know your thoughts on that, if that's something that you have thought about, or if you've seen that in other people or what.
Yeah, there's no doubt that guys and men have lost their way a little bit. There's a lot of things to blame. It could be bad parenting. It could be technology, right? I mean, combination of the two certainly is probably, they're probably pretty high on the list, I would say. But yeah, I think those basic skills that uh, really separate, predator from prey, and the reason we are the apex animal on this planet, the apex predator, if you think about it, we're not anymore, right? Because we rely on systems to do a lot of this stuff for us. But if those systems go away, then you're going to be in a rough spot, not knowing how to do this type of stuff. I kind of equate it to, in the SEAL community, it was always map and compass. My first part of my career, and the GPSs back then were like they were the mugger and the plugger. They were like the size of a book, right? And that was high speed secret gear. And so, but you looked at it, you're like, this big ass thing, I'll just stick with my map and compass, right? But as technology got better, then now you've got the GPS right here on your phone, or you've got it on your wrist, and Garmin and a lot of other companies have come around with some incredible products. But I bring that up because even towards the end of my career, you still had your map and compass on you. You still knew how to use it, even though your primary was a GPS to get you on target, right? So it's important that men continue to then brush up on all of those more analog ways of doing things, but also at the same time embrace the advances of the digital world. It's okay to do both, but don't forget about the analog way, because it is the one thing that will save your ass when there are no batteries, or the power goes down, or the lights go out. It's the analog stuff that's going to keep you moving forward.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And I mean, we see that too, like in parents that, I really applaud the parents that want to teach their kid to drive a stick, even though that car might not be available, to their grandkids or whatever the case is. They may all be gone, or, maybe, something that's just not as, you're probably not going to see one. Maybe everything's just automated. Who knows? But just teaching that skill and recognizing that there's just some things are just valuable to know for the sake of knowing them, whether it gives you that confidence, whether it's just a building block for something else. And there's all kinds of examples like that. I mean, like we took out, when we moved into our house, we took out the gas fireplace and converted it back to wood, things like that, because I wanted my boys to think, okay, the way you build a fire is not by flipping a switch. The way you build a fire is with kindling, and, after you split the wood and you let it season and all that kind of stuff. Right.
That's right.
That's a pretty simple thing that you can do, even if you're in the, the suburbs, to get them prepared for, worst case scenarios, or use it as a building block just for that sort of confidence in life. One of the things that I really love about the book is how you've titled each chapter as "Be Your Own," fill in the blank, lumberjack, or whatever the case is. And so, each chapter kind of has that title: "Be Your Own, Be Your Own, Be Your Own." And I think that's so effective in helping people understand, like, I am responsible for this aspect of my life. Even though I can outsource it, I still want to be able to be responsible. I want to be my own guy that shows up in these areas. So anyhow, I just thought that was cool. We don't have to jump on that, but I thought I was like, man, that's smart.
I appreciate that.
So the book has got each chapter kind of, I think most of the chapters have a Henry David Thoreau quote. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of his. Actually, for those who are watching the video, maybe you can see this. We've got I don't know if it'll focus in on it. We've actually got a beard oil that we do based after Henry David Thoreau.
Nice.
And it's, he's just one of those guys that, I don't know if it's kind of like maybe when you buy a new car and you're like, oh, you start seeing it everywhere. But he's one of those guys that for whatever reason, lately, I've just been like noticing he's popping back up. He's becoming much more relevant, because I think he's hitting on some things that men have really missed out on. So I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on why he was such a prominent figure for, many of his quotes just fit naturally with the theme of the book.
Yeah. I mean, he is kind of an author of self-reliance in his own way. If you take a lot of his work and his quotes and really read them and pay attention to the words, it is exactly the points that we all need to be hearing today, right? That self-sufficiency, self-reliance thing, I've been just pounding that drum for quite some time. Even 100 Deadly Skills was still about being self-reliant, be your own 911, right? Mm-hmm. And, it is no different. And I think he was well ahead of his time. And I find it interesting that his words are timeless, Yeah. And there's several other authors out there that are like that and have put together some really great philosophical point of views that certainly apply to today. But sprinkling that out within the book kind of kicks off the chapters and sets the tone. And once again, highlighting our past and the things that we all knew how to do, and then tapping into the present in the modern aspect. I feel like combining all of that together is what balances the chapters, so that people don't think this is, I'm not pushing Little House on the Prairie or, some kind of like, go out and live in the woods and join a cult and, or whatever. This is just strictly skills, and I think people forget, as I mentioned earlier, skills don't, run out of batteries. Skills don't lose power, right? Skills only get better the more you use them. And there's very few things on this planet that actually do that, right?
Yeah.
But the more you use your skills, the better you get at them. Everything else that we have, the more you use it, the more worn and torn it becomes, and it eventually falls apart. But skills are something that you just have to have. And you can the other goal of the book was to give everyone a starting point. And that's why each chapter is so diverse. You got everything from be your own butcher to be your own homemaker, right? So maybe, butchering isn't something you just want to jump into. Well, that's okay. You can go to be your own homemaker and learn how to take, beeswax, coconut oil, and make your own shampoo or your own pomades or your own conditioner, right? Learn the power of some of the stuff you have in your shelf. It's not just for cooking.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things you can do with a lot of the products that we have sitting around our house right now. And, but if those two aren't really all that interesting to you, well, then you can head over to be your own hunter or be your own farmer. So I tried to really diversify the chapters into what I thought were the 10 main aspects of a rugged lifestyle.
Yeah. And
give people that opportunity to either dip their toe in or go ahead and dive in head first. I mean, you take your pick. But and I also tried to build it so that whether you live in an apartment in Manhattan, a suburb here in North Dallas, or out in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, there is something in this book for you to be more self-reliant.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned cults a second ago. I had a kind of a funny thought. So there's a cult actually that's pretty close to us, and they own a deli, which is, I've not been there, but I've been told that the sandwiches are fantastic. So for anybody who's listening to this, if you're thinking about joining a cult, make sure they do something more useful than sandwich making, although, it could be helpful down the road, but it would suck to get lined up with like the sandwich making cult and not realize it until after you got fully, invested there, in a moment of crisis. So, one of the things that's interesting about Henry David Thoreau too is that he was writing what he was writing. He was stealing away to go out to Walden Pond and all of that in the 1800s. Like we as men, like in modern age, we think about the 1800s as being like this ultra rugged, resilient kind of time period, and it was for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But he felt like this sort of oppression of modern society kind of encroaching on him, and it was hampering, even at that time, it was hampering him from being the kind of man that he wanted to be. And so he felt that really strong need to just get away from it all. And of course, it's where we get a lot of his writings from. And so I think, man, like for the guys that are feeling that today, like that's very warranted. Like it shouldn't be a surprise that as things have gotten softer, as society has gotten, modernism has encroached more and more on our life, that sense that a man feels of just like, I want to get out of here. I want to do things on my own. I want to have my hand in the soil. I want to have, a hard day's work, that puts effort into something that actually matters directly to me, not just like, a boss or whatever. I think that's so, men need to recognize that that's a very natural thing. And we shouldn't be like, I'm just too, whiny, or I got it so good, I shouldn't complain. That there's something inside of us that really is drawn to that sort of rugged resilience. And, if Thoreau felt it, we definitely should be allowed to feel it these days.
Yeah, I think the more that I got into the book and then also placing his quotes, if you had to sum it all up, and most of what he was saying is that when you do something for yourself or for your family, that is true freedom. That is true independence. When you do it yourself, right?
Yep.
There's nothing more independent or sense of freedom than getting out there, putting in the hard work, and then the feedback on that hard work is tangible. It's real, right? You get done for the day, you're sweating, your hands are dirty, and then you've got some kind of result that you can see that you've done. And that is where that sense of satisfaction and gratification for all that labor turns around and then feeds that independence and that true freedom.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah.
A lot of the skills that you outline in the book as well. I thought, man, like these would be great if, well, I mean, like let's say everything goes to hell in a handbasket, right? And we need these skills, like, seriously.
Yeah.
To offer these things to your community to be of value to like whatever that new community is. But then I thought there's some things in there as well that could be useful for your community, like today, like, growing a garden. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
if somebody shows up at work, and they've got fresh veggies, it's like, that's awesome. Or if they've got eggs to give out,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Like that, like that's amazing. Right.
Yeah.
And so I just love that this notion that this isn't just, yes, it's skills that you can use and you can learn to be resilient, but it's also something that goes beyond just ourselves and actually can be applied a lot of ways, today, I think.
Yeah. I think that's a great point because, I mean, what better way to really, when you talk about a community or a neighborhood, getting back to bartering again, you know?
Yeah.
Someone's got chickens. Okay, good. I'm going to do some vegetables. I'm going to grow some tomatoes. Someone else, yeah, they're raising, they got 100 rabbits. They're going to provide the protein. I got the vegetables, and the other guy across the street's got the eggs. And you start just sharing. And once again, you're not relying on other, sources or outsourcing. You know where all of it came from. You know how healthy it is.
Yep.
You've had total control on all of it from beginning to end, and that in itself is just awesome.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I remember as a kid, we had a little orchard, and one of the things I hated was actually picking the apples. Um, but I would take the apples sometimes to some of the elderly ladies that were in our, you can call it a neighborhood, but basically it's just out in the country.
Yeah.
So I'd take these apples, in a couple buckets and stuff like that. It seemed like grueling work for me as a kid. But, it never failed that at least once an apple pie would show back up, to our house, just to say, hey, thanks for bringing these apples by.
Yeah.
And no doubt she took them to church or wherever else, that these could be used. And my grandparents, they would grow vegetables, and they still do, and they'll take them to neighbors, and then those neighbors will have something different to offer in return. And it just, it's just awesome. And this is something that I just assume that's the way the world worked until you get into modern culture or the suburbs, and it doesn't work that way. And it really ought to. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Was there anything, like when you're writing this book and you're doing the research for it, was there anything that stood out to you or surprised you, or anything that's just like, wow, that's really cool, that comes to mind?
Yeah, there was a bunch of stuff. The one I really thought was cool is like on the water catchment side. When you talk about, the one source we all need, and that is completely free, but yet we choose to pay for it, right? Water. And so I found it interesting, and I put a little, it's a simple math equation, and it's not to bore people. I think most people be like, holy crap, I didn't know this, right? So if you have, let's say, whether it's your home, a shed, a workshop, or, all three, right? And you put a gutter system on it with a down pipe or down drain, and you set it up so that you can actually collect water into 55-gallon drums. There's food safe ones. You can buy them pretty inexpensive almost anywhere. You can buy different sizes all the way up to like 500, 1,000, 10,000 gallons.
Jeez.
You can collect water. But the math equation is pretty simple, and to keep it simple here so people can visualize is, let's say it's 1,000 square foot roof,
Okay.
right? And you get 1 inch of rain. Okay. 1,000 square foot, 1 inch of rain will give you over 600 gallons of free water.
Goodness
right?
gracious.
Right. And so if you've got this water catchment system set up on all your structures, let's say you do live on a property and you've got a home and a workshop and maybe stables and a barn, and you go around and just take a weekend and, put gutters on everything and then the down pipes into your own system. It's an incredible way and easy right? I mean, it's not, once you do it, it can last you a lifetime. You're going to have enough water for yourself, your family. You're going to have enough water for your gardens and everything you've got going on. You've got enough water for your animals. And I just never really, you take it for granted, right? I mean, we all do. You turn on your faucet and there it is. And and you're paying some bill each month.
Yeah.
But you don't pay attention to it because it's on auto draft. But there are these free resources for almost a lot of major requirements we have in our lives, and you just got to take the time to go kind of set up the system for minimal effort, really, and minimal money. There's a couple things you got to do ahead of time and think about, obviously any rainwater that hits your roof. Well, then you got to filter. Ideally, you filter it so you can actually take pantyhose and put it over the gutters. That keeps the bird poop, leaves, and dirt out.
Yep.
Leaves you worrying, really leaves the microscopic stuff. But I mean, filtration systems are easy and to come by. You can set it up so that, you have your big collection tank and you go out and you can literally fill up bottles and purify it or filter it however you want. There's a lot of different ways. All of them are pretty inexpensive. But once again, what a great sense of like independence and freedom when you don't have to rely on the grid for one resource that if you don't have it, you die, pretty cool. But I tried to put a lot of different stuff like that so that folks can, no matter where they live, they can try a version of that kind of system if they want. But when you talk about like the most arid climates on the planet, whether it's, the Southwest or just the South in general, but definitely like Arizona and New Mexico, they get usually, they don't get a lot of rain, but they do get 12 inches or more. So now you do the math on 12 inches of rain, you still have plenty of water, even in the most, desert climates. You just have to, have your system set up and ready to catch it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild. And I think, what you just said is, people wait around for a solution, for someone else to show up with a solution for them. Make my faucet work, make my electricity come back on, whatever the case is. And, how freeing is it to say, I don't even think about that. I don't even need that. It's not a concern of mine. I know how to catch my own water. I know how to, provide my own electricity and that kind of stuff. It's a serious sense of freedom. And I think I encourage every guy who's listening to this podcast to get the book, but also to find one thing in the book that is practical that you can do or do with your family, because it's fun for the kids too. Kids love this stuff, by the way. My boys are now 19 and 22 years old, so they're kind of grown up. But when they were little, man, they loved to do anything. Like if it was like drying meat, splitting wood. We have a neighbor that has some fig trees, or has a fig tree, and about maybe every other year or so, it'll really have some awesome figs. And so we'll pick those and, dry those out, that kind of stuff. But just, which is a challenge in North Carolina because of the humidity.
Yeah.
But just figuring that kind of stuff out and doing those kinds of things, it just plants the seed in your kids that like, oh, I can take care of myself. Like these sort of more primitive, if you want to call them like that, skills are still like, easy to do today. Yeah. And it's just, it's a great way to, have family time and then also teach yourself some skills. So
no doubt. I think, another one worth bringing up that you don't hear about often probably because there's no money in it. And that is, geothermal, right?
Yeah.
Geothermal, you could go to your local hardware store and grab, depending on the space you want to keep cool, for example. Let's say you've got a workshop or a shed or even your own home, or if you're into tiny homes, this is a great way to keep it at one, climate control it for free, right?
Okay.
So if you've got, let's say, a 500 square foot little tiny home, or your man cave or whatever, and you want to make sure that it stays at least somewhat tolerable all year around, most people don't know that if you dig 6 to 8 feet down it is a nice, cool 55 degrees all year round, no matter where you are on the planet, right? 55 degrees, no matter where you are.
Okay.
And then you can basically dig out a square, rectangular hole, whatever, that's 6 foot. Now, it would need to be a certain square footage based on the space you're trying to climate controlled. Okay. But once you do the math, and it's real easy, it's just the square footage. Then you're going to go ahead and dig your hole, and then you're going to create a grid of PVC pipe. Okay. It could be 2-inch PVC pipe, a lot of little elbow joints and T joints. And imagine that grid, by the time you get done, it'll look like a net, a cargo net, lots of little squares, right? All interconnected. And at one end, at one corner of your grid, you're going to have an intake. That intake is going to be curved up and it'll be at surface level. Your grid will be down in your trench, okay, laying flat. And then you can buy these solar panel or these solar powered fans, right? So you insert that on your intake and it sucks in. Let's say you live in New Mexico. It's going to suck in 120 degree air. It's going to pull it down 6 feet into the earth or more. Then it's going to go through that grid of PVC pipe. It's going to get nice and cool. Then you're going to have an output that's going to be coming out at the opposite corner. And let's say it's coming up right from the floor of your shop, or it can go into the side of the wall, wherever you direct it. And there's another fan, right? Solar powered, that is then going to pull the air through the grid, but push it into your home or your structure.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, are you going to get 55 degrees? No, you're probably going to get more like 65 degrees. You're going to turn 120 degrees into probably 65 degrees for free. And the solar, these little fans, you're talking 20, 30 bucks a piece, in the PVC, well, with the supply demands these days, you might be paying for, that, but it's going to be cheaper than, a new AC unit, or any of the other options that are out there, and it's pretty much guaranteed all year round, unless you have a problem with one of your little fans, but those are easily replaceable. Yeah. But I tried to put what I thought would be cool. They're not really tricks. They're things that are out there and certain groups of people do and use all day, every day. You just don't know about some of these things because, like I said, if there isn't some kind of, money or a program or, some kind of scheme you can't put behind it, then nobody gets behind it. Right. But the, free water and free climate control, like no one wants to hear about that. Companies don't want you to know about that, because but it is there and it's doable. You just have to get creative with some of these skills I put in the book, and you can figure it out and make it happen for yourself.
Yeah, man, I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant and pretty cool too. Imagine, the guys coming over to your shop or your man cave or wherever it happens to be, a shed you built in the back, and be like, man, how's it so cool in here? Well, let me explain this to you.
Right.
Check out this book. And no, I think this kind of stuff is brilliant, and it is simple, but it's also something that most guys they geek out over, like that they would love to do a project like that. So,
and you can take those projects to the nth level, which is what most dudes do, right? They're like, okay, how can I take this and make it so advanced?
Right. Yeah. I've got a cold storage room at Yeah. No, that's incredible, man. Really, really good stuff. All right. So what's the best way for people to purchase The Rugged Life?
The Rugged Life is available everywhere books are sold. If you like to walk in and support actual brick and mortar places, it'll be there. Online, of course, Amazon is the easy button. Mm-hmm. It'll show up on your front door. And then if all else fails, go to clintemerson.com. My entire ecosystem is there, and you can, there's all kinds of stuff there.
Man, fantastic, man. Well, another great book, Clint. I really appreciate it, man. And I appreciate your time here. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, buddy. I'm glad we could connect.
You bet.
All right. Take it easy. Thank you.